There is a specific and significant public health risk with rabies and other zoonotic diseases within dog and cat meat trade, specifically dog meat trade. Technically, according to the law in Vietnam, dogs are supposed to have a vaccine certificate. So you've got a truck with 500 dogs, and each dog's meant to have a paper that says it's had a rabies vaccine. Anybody with any common sense, like, well, how are you going to prove that? How do you possibly know that? Especially when most of these dogs are stolen from the street.
You know, I'm told all the time, hey, the West is killing more animals, blah, blah, blah. And I say, yes, but I don't. I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for almost 40 years.
Excellent, yeah.
And they say, well, why? For your health? And I said, no, I don't rescue animals to kill animals.
It's less awful than when they're kind of killing them one by one. Usually like in Vietnam, you'd have a cage full of dogs and they'll kind of hit them over the head, pull them out and slit the throat in full view of all the other dogs, right? Which is just, it's so awful. So the drowning pits, in one way, it's more efficient, I guess. You've got 10, 15 dogs in a cage and they just go into this big, fetid, disgusting tank of water. And again, though, you think about like the disease risk and like they don't change the water, it's absolutely disgusting. So that was a real eye-opener in a very horrendous way.
It's changed a lot.
Yeah.
The younger generation, and we've got many, many volunteers in Korea who are under the age of 40, and they want nothing. They don't want this in their country at all. And obviously, there's a ban that's going into effect in 2027.
Logical behavior change and sort of fundamental attitudes that we need to understand. That we need to understand, how can somebody have a pet dog and love it and then kill those dogs, in sort of the same space.
To begin our next interview with a special acknowledgement. My conversation with Matt Backhouse from Four Paws was recorded prior to the devastating earthquakes that struck Thailand and Myanmar. I'm relieved to report that I've since spoken with Matt, and thankfully his team is safe. Despite the challenging conditions, they're working tirelessly to provide critical aid to all those affected by this disaster, including, and as always, the voiceless animals in need. Here's my interview with Matt. Hope you enjoy it. Joining us today is Matt Backhouse. He is the head of Stray Animal Care Southeast Asia for Four Paws International. So with that, I'd like to introduce Matt. So, Matt, how are you? Tell me a little bit about everything that's going on in Thailand right now, and then we can go into, some of the things that you're doing with Four Paws. And, I've had a history with Four Paws going back a few years, Jackson Z and a few others, and I think it's a great organization. We've been on disaster relief with them, and I can't speak highly enough. They're one of the few groups that I put a ton of support in, and I tell our supporters too, because we don't look at things as competitive. We look at things as we're all doing the same thing. So we've got a little different philosophy than a lot of groups, and our group is basically saying, hey, we can help you, you can help us, let's do it.
Yeah, that's good. It's refreshing to hear, because you're right, there's a lot of competition within groups and sort of unnecessarily as well, right? Like we're all moving towards the same goal, especially with something as complex as a disaster response. You shouldn't be in competition for anything in that situation, right? Like all hands on deck and everybody help each other out. Yeah, well, no, that's good to hear. Yeah, I've been working with Four Paws now for the last 5 years. So I'm
Okay.
based in Thailand. I'm originally from the UK, but my wife and I have lived and worked in Thailand now for the last 16 years, all around the country, all different kind of projects and programs, as well as a year in India as well, working for a Humane Society back in 2015, I think, as well.
HSI?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
HSI. So I worked on a big project there in India. It was a big rabies mass dog vaccination campaign for rabies control in India back then.
Yeah, we were doing a lot of disease mitigation, population control, early 2000s through, through, well, even today we're still doing some of it. Not as much as we used to. There's a lot more groups out now that are doing it with their mobile facilities and things like that. But
Yeah.
we were embedded in the Middle East for a long time doing disease mitigation and population control. So,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
tell everybody a little bit about what you're doing with Four Paws right now, and then we could
So,
talk about there's some tie over between our two organizations and what we do. And there's a lot more things that you do and some that we do that isn't so tied together. But go
mhm.
ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. So my current role is I'm the head of stray animal care for Southeast Asia. So what that means is I'm responsible for a bunch of different stray animal care programs. So like you just described, sort of population management, population control. But I sit sort of between two roles. So I work on the stray animal care and also the dog and cat meat trade work. So I'm responsible for programs here in Thailand, where I live. So I'm in Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand. Also Cambodia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So there are kind of core countries where we're working. But obviously, thankfully now, dog meat trade is not such a big issue in Thailand. You know, there's some excellent success. Like,
No. It
it
was
still
when
goes
I
on.
was there. Yeah, when I
Yeah,
was there,
yeah.
that's what got me into rescue in the dog and cat meat trade.
Oh yeah.
Was in Thailand. My initial um, my initial putting my feet in the fire, so to speak, was in '98
Mm,
in Thailand, and it was quite an eye-opening experience for me. So
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it was horrendous here. Like millions of dogs going out. Mostly, I mean, still being killed and consumed within Thailand, but as you know, like a lot of those going across the border through Laos into Cambodia and Vietnam. Um,
Cambodia to Vietnam was the routes that we used to
yeah,
do some things in. Yeah,
it's sad to say that that trade route is still active. Obviously, Thailand had success in that they policed and patrolled the borders, especially with the Thai Navy, were a big sort of implementing partner in stopping the trucks at the borders, stopping these illegal crossings. But yeah, we're still, doing investigations and still looking into dogs and cats, but mostly dogs in this instance, like illegally and semi-legally transported from Cambodia, Laos into Vietnam, and then out of Vietnam, through to parts of China as well. So still going on, unfortunately.
it is
But Thailand is a
unfortunate.
good example of progress in the ASEAN region as well, right? You can see that it doesn't have to be a ban on dog and cat meat trade to stop this thing happening. There's all these different ways, and so policing the borders does come with its own problems. You still get thousands of dogs in Thailand that are still in shelters now as a result of many of these interceptions and confiscations, which takes, as well as just taking money and resource, like not often a great life for the dogs. If you're in a shelter with 3, 4 thousand other animals, it's pretty stressful.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we're in a hard job. There's no kind of easy, nice solution for these kind of complex problems. So
No, no, and then I'll tell you, when my group started in Thailand. We initially didn't really know where to begin back in 98, 99, 2000.
okay.
We were really kind of feeling our way through this whole thing because we had to be careful of the government. We had to be careful of certain things back then because there was a big pro dog meat trade group that really pushed it.
Right.
And kind of like what happened in South Korea, where we've been for quite a while as well.
Hmm.
But we used to, I wouldn't say hijack. What is the proper term? Uh, Detour trucks with dogs, and some had 100 dogs, some had 200 dogs, and we would kind of take those trucks off the road, so to speak. And that was the only
Right.
way back then to stop it. Unfortunately, we got caught once doing it. We were turned in by an informant, and
Oh, boy.
yeah, we spent a little time in Thailand in a prison for a very short period of time until the embassy got us out. But it was a complicated situation back then.
Yeah,
Um,
I bet. I bet you were sweating in the Thai
uh,
prisons. No joke. Yeah.
no, it's not a joke, and people don't understand that. You think that in America, you think that they have it really rough here in a prison. You have no clue what it's like to be in a Thai prison, even for 48 hours. It is unbelievable. So
Yeah.
I don't want to go through that experience ever again.
Yeah, I'm glad to say that I haven't had that happen. But spoken to enough people that have been on the wrong side of things, and even just for a short time, yeah, it's
Mm.
extremely stressful. And you're doing something which is, a noble and sort of a good thing to be doing. But again, if you're on the wrong side of the law at the time and on the wrong side of the wrong person, honestly, that can make a big
That's the
difference.
that's the thing is,
Yeah.
we thought we could trust the person that we were with. He'd been with us a few times before that, and then there was not a bounty, but a reward put out for information leading to who had hijacked these trucks, stopped them, and done some things, and unfortunately, the reward was large enough for him to say, you know what, these are guys that they're not ties, so I am going to take the money and I'm going to turn them in, and that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean it happens, right? And it's unfortunate, and it's an interesting problem sometimes when if you're doing something that you care about because you care about it. There's often people that you work with that it's maybe in some way or other. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of people that deeply care about animals, deeply care about issues. There's other people that just need a paycheck. They just need to make some money. They'll kind of do the job. And unfortunately, if there's enough money waived by the other people, so they're going to take that.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
It's challenging. I mean, we still we have investigations that go on. And we work with different investigations companies and different colleagues in different parts of Southeast Asia. And you really have to be mindful of kind of who you trust, how much information you divulge, especially when you're working on something that's sensitive. And, especially in the case of dog and cat meat trade, there's like a big legal component, which by no means is good, but there is a very strong illegal sort of criminal undercurrent to a lot of these things, and these people are really dangerous.
yeah, they are, and our group is made up of all former combat veterans, and we learned how to kind of manipulate and circumvent and adapt to when we were in Thailand, especially. But Cambodia, Vietnam is the other place that I got to tell you, I was that's a place that I have to be very, very careful of, because you get thrown in jail there, it won't matter. There's no embassy to try and get me out or get any of us out. So
Mm.
Thailand was a little different. Before the coup, it was there was some bad things going on there, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of criminal element. And when you put a dent into their financial gain, which was dog meat trade,
Hmm.
and whether it's taking dogs off the street or stealing pets or whatever, when you start putting a dent in that, they don't take too kindly to it.
Yeah, and even obviously Four Paws is operating in a different way in that we're looking at legislation and policy change, and we're trying to do things the official proper way, right? Because we want to see this kind of sustainable legal reform. But money and the people involved in the thing is a massive factor to consider, and it's not to say that, you can't be making moral judgments on what people do or don't decide to do to kind of make money. Like, I've met a lot of people who work in the dog and cat meat trade, Vietnam particularly, but lots of different countries where, maybe when you first start out, you have this sort of preconception. These people are like, why would they do this? And why this and this? And a lot of the time, really nice, normal people who just don't have a lot of opportunity. They need to feed their kids, and I remember one guy, really just a really nice, friendly guy who had a big, horrendous cat slaughterhouse. He said, look, I don't really have a lot of options. This makes good money, and my kids are more important to me than these cats, which is a very confronting thing, because I get it, right? Like, I don't have kids, but I understand. You want to take care of your family. You want to look after the people that are important to you. And so then it starts to make you think, well, yeah, I mean, obviously it's super complex. There's people doing it for all sorts of different reasons, but underneath it all, money is the driving factor, whether that's gotten
Yes.
legally or illegally. But the people that you take their livelihood away when it's illegal and it's high value and they're making a lot of money, yeah, it's
Yeah,
treacherous to upset those people
you
for
know,
sure.
we've come across similar situations throughout Asia, and in Korea. Korea is a little different because of they believe that dogs are their Viagra. In the summer that dog meat provides cooling system for their internal organs. But Viagra is the biggest thing. Their sexual enhancement, and that's what they believe. And it's not unlike in Africa, with rhino horns and things like that. I mean, it's misconception, but and it's a lack of education. Um, what what do you think right now? Are you guys doing like in Korea? We're trying to do a lot of education,
Hmm.
and it's really changed their generationally. It's changed a lot.
Yeah.
The younger generation, and we've got many volunteers in Korea who are under the age of 40. I mean, a lot, and they want nothing. They don't want this in their country at all. And obviously, there's a ban that's going into effect in 2027.
Hmm.
And we advocated, with the government, we advocated through protests. We did a lot of things in Korea leading up to this.
Hmm.
Canine Global Rescue did. And, I found that education and giving them an alternative, and when we presented our plan to the government in 2018, it had alternative sources of income to provide for them. And whether it was turning the dog farm into an agricultural site where they were growing onions and garlic and whatever it was, but they actually found that they were making more money from doing that than they did from the dog meat trade, and they didn't have their grandchildren saying, Grandpa, why are you killing dogs? Why are you doing this? And so it was a matter of giving them an alternative income and providing for their families. Like you said, in Vietnam, it's the same thing. I mean, this guy that you talked to, it's how does he make a living for his family if he's not doing the cat meat trade? And that's something that we've got to get the governments involved in. We've got to get the educational thing where and the finances to provide them with alternative sources for income. And how's that going, do you think?
It's interesting because, I'd say in Vietnam, certainly, like the sentiment for the kind of younger generation being really against this is absolutely the same. In the kind of start of our research and development of campaigns against dog and cat meat trade, we did market research studies and like consumer attitude studies in Vietnam and Cambodia, particularly kind of focused on those two countries. We do a lot of work in Indonesia, but that's principally through this coalition, DMFIs, Dog Meat Free Indonesia, who again have the same thing, right? When you look at the events and the protests and the things they organize, it's a huge amount of young Indonesian people. Like the
Right.
demographic is really just more switched on, more aware. and more compassionate, I would say, overall. Both Vietnam and Cambodia have a high increase in like companion animal pet ownership. So specifically dogs and cats in this case. And in Vietnam, the market research study that we did, like 97% of the people opposed eating dogs and cats. They said it wasn't Vietnamese culture, it wasn't part of their culture. But again, most of the people that still eat it, the kind of die-hard consumers, are older. They share a lot of these kind of superstitious beliefs, the heating and the cooling, and they're kind of in Cambodia. It's common to have dog meat kind of prescribed by doctors postpartum. So after somebody given birth,
Ugh.
make sure you eat your dog meat. Um, so again, it's interesting these kind of myths that pervade. But some of the cultural behaviors are also very similar. So there's often alcohol consumed with dog meat.
Right.
So, of course, it's going to warm your body if you're drinking your body weight in rice wine. That's going to do the job as well. So what we found is it's been more effective for us, especially as a Western-centered organization, right? So Four Paws has offices in Thailand and Vietnam, and we've just opened an office in Cambodia. But essentially, I am a straight white British man going to a Vietnamese person and saying,
Yeah.
"Why are you eating this? I don't like this." Which,
And I run into that all the time. And
yeah,
even in Korea, last week, we just got back from Korea. Even
okay,
though I've been in Korea for over 15 years, a long time,
yeah,
the same thing. I'm not Korean. I don't look Korean. I wasn't born Korean. And for me to try and put my values, is what they're saying, on them. And then when I try to, the argument is, the scientific base. We use that a lot. We use a lot of things. Um, but I'm not Korean. Who am I to tell them what they should be doing, right?
yeah,
And my whole thing is, cats, they don't know your race. They don't know your religion. They don't.
mm,
They just know the love or the harm that you're doing them. That's one of the things that I try to that our group really does emphasize, especially with the younger generation, that these are myths. These are scientific myths. Dog meat does not provide stamina and Viagra, sexual enhancement for your body.
yeah.
Where, and the other thing is, but it can provide disease. You're eating a diseased dog, you could get very sick. And I know that in Vietnam, um, I know that there have been cases of people eating rabid dogs,
Hmm.
and there has been a real problem with that. So, you
So
know,
that's one of the main avenues that we use to kind of communicate, especially to government and to officials, because there's a number of different aspects. So if we just take Vietnam as that example with the rabies, right? So generally, what we found when we spoke to people about, do you believe you would get sick? If you ate a dog that was diseased or had rabies, and it's kind of like people think about salmonella. Like, well, if you just cook it properly, it should be fine. However, there's been lots of incidents. I think 2 cases this year already of dog meat traders. There was a guy in the south of Vietnam who was bitten by one of the dogs that he'd stolen. That was,
rabid.
his yeah, had rabies, and he died, unfortunately. And it's crazy because then you start to think there's a lot of stuff comes into that as well. You get a lot of people in that kind of animal rights or welfare movement saying, "Oh well, kind of he shouldn't have been doing what he's doing," but we don't want to see anybody dying from rabies and dying from
No.
these kind of diseases. And there's a number of incidents of rabies positive dogs that have bitten other dogs, that have escaped in markets, that have bitten traders. Even as terrible as it is, the splatter from when they're killed, they're killed so violently, as
Sure.
I'm sure you know,
I
that
know.
kind of blood and brain splatter has been inhaled before by slaughterhouse workers in Hanoi, who've then died from rabies from the inhaling of
Correct. Yep.
rabies infected blood and saliva, which is just insane, right? So then you think, okay, well, you can move away from the kind of animal health and welfare argument, which, as is evident from other animals that people consume. And again, this is one where in the West, like we kill a lot more of other species than dogs and cats are being killed in Southeast Asia or Asia generally. So we can be aware of that and we can say, yeah, you need to be aware of your own hypocrisy as well at times when talking about these things. But there is a specific and significant public health risk with rabies and other zoonotic diseases within dog and cat meat trade, specifically dog meat trade. So that's where we try and use, like yourselves, like it has science and data and evidence to say, look, if you've got, the conservative estimate in Vietnam is 3 million dogs per year, give or take. And those dogs are moving all across the country, often being brought in from Cambodia still. Like we have recent investigations and found evidence of cross-border transport. We've done multiple investigations where technically, according to the law in Vietnam, dogs are supposed to have a vaccine certificate. So you've got a truck with 500 dogs, and each dog's meant to have a paper that says it's had a rabies vaccine. Anybody with any common sense, like, well, how are you going to prove that? How do you possibly know that? Especially when most of these dogs are stolen from the streets or,
Exactly.
so then this is often faked, right? So you have forged papers, you have kind of, if the truck does get checked, which is very rarely, pay a small amount of money to the official, the guy at the border, whatever. Okay, I'll sign your paper. See you
Goodbye.
later. Yeah. And so the fines are so low, there's no deterrent. If you've got 500 dogs on a truck and you have to pay $100 fine, so what? You're going to be making thousands of dollars selling all of those animals in the end. So we try to say, look, this is essentially undermining all of your public health efforts to control and eliminate rabies. And then when you can really pinpoint certain cases like this, track evidence of rabies positive animals moving around the country, we can then at least say, well, the kind of economic cost of trying to transition people's livelihood is one thing, but the public health and the economic impact of people and rabies still being a transmittable zoonotic disease that is 100% preventable, then we can start to make that kind of economic and public health and safety argument. But still, you're right at the core of it. Like, the ban in South Korea has been interesting because that's now being looked at by Vietnamese government. We've been asked by the Cambodian government, like, oh, what's happening in South Korea? And I think the key thing there is that, was it 5 of the draft bills that were submitted to the Korean parliament sort of to process this, all of them had an economic component for the people working in the industry. And
Correct.
so you're right, like that's what we really need to do in the other countries that we're looking at. We can't just go in and say, you need to ban this overnight, because what do the people do who are currently depending on that for their livelihood?
No, there needs to be a plan in place, and really, that's what in and we concentrated in Korea because the Korean government was actually very welcoming to us for a long time. The
Brilliant.
former president, President Moon, I met with him. He accepted our plan, and we had it written in Korean and in English, but it had all of the steps that it would take,
Mhm.
and literally, they're literally following those steps right now. The problem is we had to, well, we didn't, but the government had to make some concessions to the pro meat. They didn't make eating dog illegal.
Mm,
Now that's coming into effect this year.
right.
So eating dog will, or not this year, in 27. Eating dog will be illegal in 2027.
Hmm.
So they had to do it in steps to satisfy some of the pro dog meat trade association, and all these other things. But
Yeah.
um, you know, one of the things is, and you brought this up. I'm told all the time, hey, the West is killing more animals, blah blah blah, and I say yes, but I don't. I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for almost 40 years.
Excellent. Yeah.
I don't, and they say, well, why? For your health? And I said, no. I don't rescue animals to kill animals. My heart is with them to save them, not to
Mm,
kill them. And so this is a choice. I don't force my views on anybody. I don't, say you shouldn't eat meat. But at the same time, I have my own views, and a lot of the guys in the group now have kind of questioned their ability and why they're eating meat, and after they've been to dog meat farms and seen this, and you know and the way that dogs are killed, you're right, it's brutal. it's
yeah.
not it's not like cattle. it is not even close to what cattle is. You know, when you are killing dogs in Korea because you believe that torture creates better sexual enhancement in the
Yeah.
meat. I mean, and the more torture the dog goes through, the greater the sexual enhancement it will give you. That I could go on for a
I
long
know. I
time, and
mean,
you know,
it's hard to fathom, isn't it? You know, and it's just it's easy to make light of what is a horrendous thing. I mean, really, if your sexual problems are that big that you need to torture a
oh,
dog to resolve them, I think there's other questions you want to be asking yourself. You know, but it's so entrenched. Yeah, you're right, and it's equally we within our own sort of cultures, like I say, I'm from the UK. There are lots of things that pervade in kind of cultural myths, especially around food, and food is so sensitive and so personal to people.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and I'm really glad that you mentioned sort of being vegetarian. So likewise, I've been vegan for a long time, so
yep,
it makes it easy in some of these conversations, especially about the hypocrisy of what do you
absolutely.
do in your country, and you go, yeah, I think that's insane too, and like you, I say, I just don't eat any animals, so it's kind of easier.
No
um,
animals. Nope.
but
Mm-mm.
what I find interesting is so you say some of the guys in the group sort of thinking about that because, as I was looking at, I watched one of your podcasts the other day and I was looking at this group thinking, yeah, I wonder what the kind of attitude towards meat consumption is with a big group of ex-military and combat vets. I would imagine they're quite a pro meat, pro hunt kind of group of guys. And so it's interesting that their first-hand experience is kind of opening them to a different sort of perception. I think that
Yeah,
happens with a lot of people.
it's interesting because when you're rescuing dogs from a combat zone like in Ukraine or in
Mhm.
Gaza or wherever, you don't think about the other animals. Even though we've rescued in Ukraine for the past 3 years, we've rescued everything you can imagine,
Mhm.
including lions, including tigers, including horses and donkeys and geese and chickens and pigs. I mean, everything. We've
Yeah.
rescued everything. And the guys are that's really made them think a lot about it. And then when they go to Korea and they walk onto a dog meat farm, because we closed one down in October.
Right.
We took the team and closed it down. They start, the wheels start turning in their head about it. And
Yeah.
why am I doing this? And wait a second, I this may not be for me. And so we've had those conversations. And again, I don't force but they know when I'm traveling in Ukraine, even at the front, I, all I I'm a vegetable diet, right? This is what I am. This is who I
Yeah.
am. And again, I'm not going to save all these animals to take them so that somebody else can slaughter them. Every
Yeah.
animal we save goes to some kind of sanctuary where they will live out their life.
Okay. Great.
So, yeah, it's this is for us. I think it's changed a lot for a lot of these
Yeah.
guys. So, tell me, I have a question about Cambodia.
Yeah.
I spent some time in Cambodia, and unfortunately, we were shutting down some places in Cambodia in the early 2000s. They had drowning pools. They put the dogs in the
Yeah.
cage and they submerge the dog until it's dead. Are they still doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of it's strange actually because I've been to Cambodia a lot. So in 2020, we now 2020. So when I first sort of started out with Four Paws, one of my main jobs was to go and sort of begin the preliminary investigations into a lot of these places, right? So I went all around Vietnam, all around Cambodia, to lots of different slaughterhouses, lots of different dog meat kind of establishments. In Cambodia at the time, people were fairly open. Not so much now, but and again, depends on how you speak to people and how you approach the situation. But I for whatever reason, I have the capacity or the ability to stand in these places watching these horrendous things and just game face it, I guess, and just be okay. I'm very much not okay with it. I mean, it's horrendous, I'd like go back to the hotel room and usually go to
Oh,
pieces. Um, But seeing
Yeah.
these drowning pits, I mean, it was just it in a horribly pragmatic way. It's less awful than when they're kind of killing them one by one. Usually like in Vietnam, you'd have a cage full of dogs, and they'll kind of hit them over the head, pull them out, and slit the throat in full view of all the other dogs, right? Which is just, I mean, it's so awful. So the drowning pits, in one way, it's more efficient, I guess. You've got 10, 15 dogs in a cage, and they just go into this big,
Yeah.
fetid, disgusting tank of water. Um, and again, though, you think about like the disease risk, and like they don't change the water. It's absolutely disgusting. So that was a real eye opener in a very horrendous way. And that still goes on, yeah, for sure. And
So
so
the
that's
first,
a uniquely Cambodian sort of approach to killing dogs. Uh,
yeah,
Give them
you
for
put it
everything.
you since we're on Cambodia, I'll tell you a very life-changing thing for me. Cambodia was, yeah, we saw the drowning pits, and um, like you said, you went back, you go back to your hotel room and you're trying to put it in a box because you're not there to stop them. You're there to understand, gather information, do everything.
Yeah.
For us, when we started this and we were in Cambodia, one of my guys, we went to a slaughterhouse where they were actually skinning the dog alive. And I spent 3 days in a hotel room with him because he had PTSD after that. He had seen the worst in humanity, he thought,
Mm.
in war. And then when he saw that, it put him over the edge. And some bad things happened. And yeah, Cambodia was I'd never had seen anything like that myself,
Hmm.
but seeing it once, that was enough to change everything in my life. You know, it it
Yeah.
it
Yeah. I
was
mean,
it
that
was just a
sounds that sounds horrendous. Like I've thankfully no experience of war. I've had a very safe, privileged life in so many ways.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, certainly for me, like I've seen a lot of horrendous animal cruelty and different things over the years. But nothing, yeah, nothing compares to
We
something.
uh we started calling them black hearts.
Yeah,
The butchers. Um, we 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 always refer to them as black hearts.
yeah,
They have their hearts empty. I mean and the amazing thing that I still, even in Korea today, throughout that time period, there were owners of these of the drowning pits or of the slaughterhouses who had their own pet dogs.
yeah. I know, right?
I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. Their
Well,
little
that's
dogs
just
running
yeah. I
around.
mean, we see that a bunch, and that to me is like I'm, kind of just sort of to slightly connect back to what you were talking about with perception of different animals. Like that to me is the most striking example of cognitive dissonance in
Yeah,
action, where you can go, "This is my pet dog. These are the ones I'm going to kill and sell," and they're like licking each other through the bars and stuff. Like this
yeah,
is
yeah.
insane. Like I mean, yeah, I kind of find this
So
fascinating. Uh,
when we did Dog, I don't know if you are familiar with the movie Dog War that followed us through Korea for 5 years, and
no, I haven't seen that. Check that
it's
out.
Dog War is going to be released to the general public once they find a distribution deal.
Okay,
The world premiere was in London at the Rain Dance Film Festival where we won
right.
the Spirit of Rain Dance award, and we've been hitting the festival circuit. I'm just the protagonist in the film. I didn't make the film. The gentleman who made it had a very clear perception when he went into it that it was going to be an unbiased point of view.
Hmm.
When he came out of it, he, he, he is now vegetarian. He has changed his. I mean, he was with us in some of these really disgusting dog meat farms in South
Yeah.
Korea, and it changed his life entirely. And in the film, there's an owner that he's interviewing, and he's
Hmm.
got his little small dogs running around. He goes, "Oh no, this is my family. This is my income. This is my family."
Yeah.
And we're just like, you have what? Where is the disconnect here? What is
Yeah.
going on?
And I think it's an important thing because then there's so many different examples. I remember seeing this one. There was a like an animal rights advocate was doing interviews at a dog meat protest in the UK. So it was a banned dog meat, so protesting dog meat, not
Mm-hmm.
like in Korea the other way around. And he was speaking to a lot of these people, and he was saying, "Why are you here? What are you up to today?" And they say, "Oh, we think dog meat's terrible, wrong, this and that." And he would then say, "Oh, okay, so are you vegetarian, vegan?" No, 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 no. And it was interesting to see a lot of Westerners instantly flip and get defensive, But equally, you go way far the other way to like you're talking about, and you get people that can very easily categorize. This is my pet dog. This is my income dog. And, we met this one guy. We actually helped him close his business and find an alternate livelihood in Cambodia. It's a really nice guy who, he's a dog meat trader. Had killed thousands and thousands of dogs, and really loved dogs. And it I really couldn't get my brain around it at first. I just couldn't fathom. And again, this is from a place of privilege and growing up in a family where I have money and a country where we have social security and a kind of state support behind us. Like I'm not a rural Cambodian man living, kind of day by day to sort of
Right.
make ends meet. So it's hard to fathom somebody that would be really, really very gentle and loving with the dogs, but still kill them at the end of the day. It was wild. So to be able to at least find him and help him do something different. We rescued the last dogs that he had, and it was really an emotional time for everybody involved, and it sort of transcended what I thought I understood about this situation, and it made me realize that more so than the kind of the rescue and the investigation and the logistics and this and that, and even more so than just education, there's a lot of psychological behavior change and sort of
Yeah.
fundamental attitudes that we need to understand. That we need to understand how can somebody have a pet dog and love it and then kill those dogs, in sort of on in the
Yeah.
same space.
I never took that much psychology in school.
Hmm.
I'd love to understand it because, we've run into it so many times and it's just baffling to me.
Yeah.
We closed down a dog meat farm in Jeonju, South Korea, and the owner of that farm was also the mayor of the town. And
Right.
the mayor had dogs that he kept in his house and that he, walked regularly. And only a few people in the town knew that the farm was his.
Mm.
And, here's this guy that, loves his dogs, does it, and he's, a prominent official in this town. And he's killing dogs. But he's got
Yeah.
his, it is just mind boggling. And I wish that I understood it. And a lot of these guys in South Korea, it wasn't necessarily for just the money.
Hmm.
We came across a lot of people. They they actually said, Matt, that they enjoyed slaughter. They
Yeah, I mean,
enjoyed
I've
it.
met those guys as well. It's there's not that many, thankfully, but yeah, I
No,
definitely met this guy in Vietnam that he loved his job a lot.
yeah. Well, I came
Uh,
across a lot of those guys in Moran Market. The
yeah,
famous market in Korea before we shut it down. Um, there were guys in that market. That's what they were apprentices, and then they became master butchers, and the whole thing. And they loved their jobs. They absolutely loved killing. And
yeah.
and I look, people work in meat, in cow factories and meat plants and
Hmm.
in the United States. I get it. I don't know that they necessarily, you know, have their heart into that all like this guy did, but
Hmm.
man, when you meet those guys, you just look at them and you just don't know what's going on with them. Yeah, it was the
Yeah.
strangest thing.
I mean, with the psychology, it's interesting because with the meatpacking farms in the US, for example, there's actually been a lot of study on kind of the consequences of exposure to that level of violence. And you know, obviously those, it's a different context. A lot of people there are migrant workers. They're working there. They really don't
Right.
want to, but
Well,
you know,
maybe
there's
not for long.
well, yeah, yeah. That's
Who knows who's going to be working those for, those meat packing plants. We don't know anymore because, yeah.
yeah.
Anyway,
I know, no, I know, but it's insane, and that's again the people that work in the kind of the dark underbelly of
yeah.
these industries that people don't really look at, but they know they exist, but they want the outcomes of them, but they don't want to deal with it. It's like when you talk to people about how animals are
Yeah.
killed, even dog meat trade. Many people are just like, oh, you know, I don't want to talk about that. But
So
they
what are your
found that
initiatives right now? What are your initiatives? What's going on with, I mean, everything is, when we were there, we were the first group. There was nobody, soy dog, nobody was there.
yeah,
There were some individuals who were trying their best to save street dogs and everything,
mhm,
but it wasn't like there were sanctuaries set up. There weren't like this, a soy dog or you guys or anything. I mean, it was like the Wild West.
yeah.
And what's going on currently? What's happened now?
So there's a couple different things, and one just to sort of tether to that last point was there's been a lot of sociological and psychological kind of study into the effects of violence in communities.
Hmm.
So, you know, in the kind of meat industry, there's a when you look at these big meat packing plants, often they're like small towns, you have high incidences of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, domestic violence, like family violence. And there's also been a lot of study into the impact of exposure to violence on children. So it was actually last year there was a resolution passed within the UN rights of the child to protect children from exposure to violence to animals, which is interesting because it's not. It's essentially saying that children who are exposed to violence of animals. I mean, in Vietnam, I've seen this a lot. You know, I'm sure you've seen it too. Like these family businesses where the mum and dad are own the dog meat trade, and the kids are kind of playing with the dogs, but also like splashing around in blood and exposed to this horrific violence. So you think it's no surprise to me that you will then get adults who are extremely desensitized to violence and capable of extreme violence as well.
Yeah.
So then it adds another kind of another string to your bow, let's say, for how you communicate to governments and authorities to say, in terms of social order, which is a big thing in Vietnam, it's a big thing in Cambodia, in terms of people being peaceful, contributing citizens, if they're exposed to this extreme violence, like that is not good for your social order. It's not good for your general sort of
Mm.
society because the violence and the kind of it will translate across. You know, it's very cliched to talk about. You know, young people that abuse animals at an early age often develop to do other more violent acts to animals and peoples as they develop.
I mean, you see death every day like that. It's going to, one, it's going to affect you, and most likely it's going to have its psychological effect, like you said, and it's going to harden you. And when
Yeah,
you become hard, you don't have those feelings for people, for children, for anybody, because you're hard now, because you're seeing it every single day, this
yeah,
violence, the killing, the killing just keeps happening, and so you're you're part of that. So
yeah.
yeah, it's
And it's
I
interesting,
get
you
it.
know, you said like with the guy that had been exposed to all these different wars, and it was the exposure to that violence to that dog that really sort of pushed him into
Oof.
that dark place. And I think it's that I can certainly relate to because I find that after seeing this for years and years, going to all these places, reviewing all this footage, you have to kind of close that door a little bit, but you also can't be numb to it because then that becomes extremely unhealthy and that can be dangerous as well. You know, see a
Yeah.
lot of people work in the animal rights and animal welfare space who have just to cope they detach, but then when they detach, they're sort of maybe in it for the wrong reasons or they're not very psychologically healthy, let's say.
Well, and
Um,
just so on that line, I've known for years, and I've talked to therapists, but I have a box in my head, and there's shelves in that box,
mm,
and some go very deep, and for what I've seen and what I've done, and and it's layered. And you're right. If I were to hold that in, I probably would explode sooner or later. and who
Yeah,
knows, what would happen. And I wouldn't want to rescue anymore. And right now, that's my main focus. That's my
yeah,
passion in life, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. But I also know that I have to witness what's happening. I can't just talk about it to people. I am a witness to this. And
yeah,
and that really helped in Korea because I saw what was going on and I could tell the government what's going on because none of them had ever been in a dog meat farm. I couldn't
yeah.
even get them to come to a dog meat farm. Oh, no, 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 no. I don't want to see. I don't want to see because once I see it, I can't forget it.
Well, there you go, right? I mean, such a key thing, and it's interesting when you campaign, with like people in the West versus people in Southeast Asian countries. I get, over here in the newspapers in Thailand, like it's a lot more graphic. If there's a road accident, there's injuries, there's not really much censoring of the imagery. So there's a
Yeah.
kind of normalization of that kind of imagery in media or campaigns. You try that back home, no chance. I mean, nothing's getting printed or published if it's too graphic. And people just can't cope with it as well, which is understandable.
Well, it was
I
hard in
would,
the movie. We had
yeah,
to leave on the cutting room floor basically some of the stuff because we knew that people would go, "Okay, I'm out," and they would leave. They
yeah,
wouldn't watch the entire film. So we we had to Andy had to balance that line really, really carefully because
yeah.
he wants to get the word and spread the word and but at the same time you can't turn away the eyes that you want to have watching this.
Yeah, it's an art, I would say, and like we've just recently finished a couple of investigations and sort of been reviewing the footage. Now you think, there's just so much of this that can't see daylight. It's not, and then that's you want people to know how terrible this is, but you have to be mindful as to how you communicate that.
Yeah.
So to kind of come back to your question about kind of the initiatives that are happening, so we're using all these kind of different tacks, right? So when you're talking to the government particularly, most of it is public health and public safety and science and data. So there is no point going to one of these officials and telling them about how terrible it is and how the animals feel. But like,
Nope.
no, not really
I
interested.
agree. Yep.
But if you go and talk to them and say, look, here is credible evidence that, you know, all of the ASEAN countries have pledged to eliminate human deaths from rabies by 2030, only 5 years' time from now. And in Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam especially, multiple human deaths from rabies each year. And so then you could say, okay, so we recognize that your priority is dealing with this disease. We have the skills and the kind of expertise as our organization and the coalitions that we work in to help you with that. But you have to recognize and you have to acknowledge that the dog meat trade, like we talked about a little earlier, is a massive influence on eliminating and controlling rabies and is undermining everything you're doing at this point. So then you'd say, well, let's have a conversation about how we can work to do this, but you need to look at this at the same time. So in Vietnam, Four Paws is now like part of the One Health Partnership. So we're the first animal welfare NGO to be part of this working group. And we specifically work on what's called the Companion Animals Technical Working Group. So we're there to talk about all sorts of issues related to dogs and cats. So our principal priority is dog and cat meat trade, but we're talking about stray animal care. We're talking about responsible animal ownership, people letting their dogs roam, and rabies vaccination, shelters, quarantines, all these various things. We're looking at all of these component parts and trying to provide sort of technical and practical assistance for the government to implement programs. Same for Cambodia, although we're just kind of getting up and running there this year. Because Cambodia, we did a lot of work on dog and cat meat trade, and we had really good momentum. But in order for us to continue, we needed to have that country entity sort of registered so that we can really work on these bigger programs. Because Cambodia is a tough one for sure. But the amazing thing in Cambodia was that Siem Reap, after not a huge amount of work with us, took the initiative to ban dog meat trade within that province. They just
I
recommended,
heard that. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was amazing, and you think, okay, so this is possible. Like, and so you then have to tailor your kind of uh, initiatives and tailor your programs for each different country because In Cambodia, they can make a provincial law. Siem Reap can ban something, and then Kampong Cham or Kampong Tom, they can ban things within the area. It doesn't work like that in Vietnam, unfortunately. Vietnam, it's top down. It has to be like in South Korea, like a national
Right.
law, national instruction. And so the other part that we need to focus on is kind of what you mentioned in the introduction, how there are all these different groups. You've got Soy Dog, you've got HSI, you've got different coalitions, Animals Asia, you've got these big organizations. We make a strong effort to have a really good dialogue with them. We want to be open about what we're doing, what they're doing, and recognize that like everybody has to prioritize the needs of their organization, right? Like that make you have to get funding, you need to keep running, you need to employ your team, all of these things. But sad to say, the problem is big enough. There is enough work for everybody for the next few years
Oh yeah.
just on dog meat trade. So
Yeah.
if we can at least say, look, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, what are you doing? Can we help you out? Can we at least not get in each other's way? Um,
And that's the
then,
biggest thing, Matt.
yeah,
That is the biggest thing is that other groups that we have, and the HSIs are just as guilty as everybody. I mean, they're worried about their base, about taking funding out of, your competition for their donor base. And
yeah,
it's amazing to me. I mean, there are other ways. Look, my whole group, there's no paid employees. There's no paid volunteers. We are all volunteers,
right,
unpaid, from the top down. So, and I know that groups can't work like that. I mean, you're doing this for a living, but you're also your heart and I can tell by talking with you that your your passion and your heart are into this. And
yeah,
and you want to make a change. And people not everybody can do this for free. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. But HSI and a few others, I look at them and I say, guys, they're, when they were in Korea and we were trying to work with them, and the next thing I know is that they were telling us that we were competition for them. I'm like, what do you,
yeah,
well, I'm not competition. We need to accomplish the same thing. So, okay, and it's just, you can't be stepping on each other. I get that, but you also can't view each other as competition. Each group specializes in certain areas and overlap in certain areas, and you have to help each other. You have to help
100%.
each other. That's the only way, if you're really into this, if your heart's really there to stop this,
Yeah,
that's the way that it's going to happen.
yeah. I think you're right. And it can be tricky because yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. I've only been at Four Paws for the last few years, but before that, like if I was in this for the money, I definitely picked the wrong field. I'll tell you that. So it's 10 years
Yeah,
of just
I,
scraping. Um,
I'm all too familiar with that. I
yeah,
I
but
I, I know, I know.
and then so
Um,
but I think it's a catch-22 because I know a lot of people who still kind of martyr themselves in that regard. They just sort of work themselves into the ground for like next to no money, and I respect it, I really do. But when we talk about the kind of being able to do this long term and do it from a good sort of healthy place physically and mentally, it's okay to kind of look after yourself a little bit while you're still doing what is
yeah,
essentially very traumatic and challenging work. And
yeah,
if you have the ability like your team to sort of all be volunteers, I mean, I think that's amazing. But you're right, like the big groups like ourselves included with that, we have to be mindful of the efforts that other people are putting in and to try and coordinate that as best you can. So there's a really good coalition for Asia now that's kind of run by Animals Asia, called AFA, Asia for Animals Coalition. They actually have a dog and cat sort of subgroup. So that is a kind of platform where we have a meeting once a month, and you kind of get all the different stakeholders from small local rescue groups, some of the bigger kind of animal welfare groups in the region. We just kind of talk about what's going on, and it's at least then a forum to kind of people are still going to be a bit cagey, right? But if we have like letters that go to governments, we want to do something as a kind of united voice. That's a
yes.
really excellent way to do that because then it's not Four Paws, it's not Soy Dog, it's not blah
No,
blah blah.
no,
It's
no.
all of us have signed on to this letter, and that can at least say, look, the collective movement of animal welfare organizations agree that this is an important thing, and we've all signed it. So that to me is encouraging. I hope that more of that will continue. And I think it's good as well to normalize like conversations like this where, you know, talking about like the mental health of people working in it. And there's good resources on compassion fatigue. There's plenty more things that people can kind of access now. So I think we have to use those things to our advantage and use the fact that we can have a conversation across, the other side of the world in different time zones and still
Yep.
so many shared experiences and things that we can learn from each other. It's amazing, like 10 years ago, it just wasn't possible. So as much as the kind of bureaucracy and the kind of infighting gets really tiring, to be honest, like I would much rather just go do the thing. It's kind of my background. That's what I've always done. But I also recognize that when you get to these levels of kind of policy change and you get to like, you're looking at changing laws, you're looking at changing ingrained cultural habits, it's a slower game and there's a bit more tiptoeing around it. But yeah, all of these things have their place. We all need to work on the things that we can contribute.
Well, look, I'm glad that you joined me today, and I look forward to further conversations with you in the future. And
Likewise, John. Yeah,
I'm the next time I'm close to Thailand, then I will let you know.
you're most welcome. Give me a shout.
Thank
I
you.
promise we won't. No dog meat. We can have a little break. Yeah,
Yeah,
show you some good
yeah.
veggie spots in Chiang Mai. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, I love the food there, believe me. I enjoy it immensely. But if there's anything that we can ever do for you, and our strategy has changed over the years. Obviously, we're not covert anymore
Yeah.
because this is so out in the open now. So we've had to change our way of dealing with this, and we saw that in Korea, which is why we were accepted by the government.
Right.
Now there's gonna be a black market that's gonna spring up in Korea. We know that, and the government's gonna turn a blind eye to it. So we're gonna have to go back in and do things that we did before because it's
Yeah.
the only way that we're gonna be able to stop it. And
Well, yeah.
but look, if you ever need anything, Canine Global Rescue, we would absolutely help in any way that we can. Just because we're concentrating in Korea right now, doesn't mean that we wouldn't go back to Thailand or Cambodia or even Vietnam at this point or
Yeah.
China. I don't know if I'm allowed back in China because I was detained there as well because of
Okay.
a certain dog meat festival that yeah, we had some issues there. So
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. You look at all the work we're doing in the region that we work in, and then you have that. Is its own unique,
yeah,
massive issue. But I think things are changing there as well.
a
So
little
it's
bit.
it's,
It's
it's
changed.
beyond the
It's
scope
changed.
of Four
Yeah.
Paws at this point. But yeah, I think. I mean,
Again,
even
the biggest
the,
problem that these governments are having is what do you do with the dogs? Even in
yes,
Korea, what do you do with
yeah,
the dogs? You're going to ban this, okay? So we are now banning it in 27. It gave them 3 years basically.
hmm
What are they going to do with a 500,000 dogs? Right? That's so
yeah,
they're saying these dogs are going to be slaughtered up until 27, and then it won't be anymore.
yeah.
That's their way of doing it. That was a concession that we had to make,
I
and the
mean,
government.
that is a problem that we talk about a lot. That it's a difficult thing for people to kind of get their brains around, especially when you love dogs, love animals. Like just having them sort of killed off and then not do it anymore still feels like a failure. It's not though. It's a win, but it's not a win for those dogs that are still going to suffer through that for the next two
No,
years.
and it's
But
there in war. It's collateral damage,
yeah,
unfortunately, and this is collateral damage to get something changed for the positive. And
yeah,
I wish that there were homes for a 500,000 dogs in Korea, but there aren't. And
I
that's
know.
the reality that I've had to face too. I've had to come to terms with that.
It's difficult, and you look at the high volume of euthanasia in shelters in the US, and where the UK, where I'm from. Here, the kind of euthanasia culture is different. That doesn't mean that the outcomes are better.
No.
And this is part of when we're looking at either roadmaps or frameworks or legislative approaches that we present to government. That has to be in there because you're right.
It
The
is.
the
Yeah.
fear is like okay, but this is kind of a flawed argument as well, right? It's like when people argue against going vegetarian because they say, well, there's going to be loads of cows and the cows are going to take over the world. Like, that's not how cows work.
Yeah.
But the principle of saying, okay, but there's going to be millions of dogs like roaming around the streets, like there really won't. But it's a
No,
concern.
the
Um,
argument that we got in Korea from the pro meat is so we had originally said euthanasia was the alternative to
yeah,
them being tortured and killed the way that they're done. And the pro
right.
meat argument was in Congress was, well, you're going to kill the dog anyway, so we might as well kill it. I was like, what? And so that
Yeah,
was one of the concessions that had to be made. But the government now realizes that euthanasia, because these dog meat traders are still they're still breeding. They're still doing it. They're not
mhm,
reducing the number of dogs. So they thought, okay, we're not gonna do implement euthanasia, but we're gonna allow them to continue to do their dog meat trade, knowing that in 27 it's gonna stop. Well, to them that doesn't mean it's gonna stop. They're still breeding these dogs.
yeah, yeah.
So euthanasia is yes, it would be the best way instead of torture for these dogs. And unfortunately, that's not something that I'm a big fan of, but
Yeah.
I don't know the alternatives except for what the meat farmers are doing right now, and that's not the alternative that I can live with.
Yeah, and like you say you've been vegetarian for 40 years. I'm like showing my age a bit now, but I've yeah about 30 years to me since I've eaten any kind of animals. So believe me when I say that like voluntarily ending the life of an animal that could have a better outcome is absolutely the last thing I want to do, and it's something that I struggle with, and I've thought about this kind of philosophy and ethics and the moral philosophy of this a lot, to the point where even like so doing a degree at the moment in social sciences and sociology, and like my thesis is on attitudes to animal euthanasia and speciesism because I can't stop thinking about it. It's the
Yeah, but
hardest
the
problem.
alternative,
Yeah,
you do think you've seen the alternative.
this is
You've
it, right?
seen that.
Yeah,
So would you, and in my world is would I rather see this dog put to sleep humanely or have him tortured and suffer a very inhumane death? And
yeah.
those are the two things that I've struggled with, but I definitely know that I want to do it the humane way. I cannot fathom hearing or seeing another dog killed the way that they do this.
And I
It's
think
just
that's the main. I think is an important thing as well for people that are listening and watching this to understand is that because often you get pushback from this, why you call yourself an animal lover, right? How can you do this? But exactly what you just said, like when you've seen it and you know that like this versus like an injection where they go to sleep peacefully versus all of these horrendous things that we've
uh,
seen, discussed, and we know still go on, it's no choice for me, and I think it's one that as people working at the front of this that we have to, like I say, make peace with, do absolutely everything we can to find these sort of possible outcomes. But for me, it's like it's always been what is the least harm, what is the most good I can do, and the least harm that I can cause. And sometimes the options are just
yeah.
shit, to be honest.
Unfortunately,
Like,
in the
yeah, so you
business,
only have a couple choices.
yeah, in the
Neither of them
business
is
we're
good.
in, unfortunately, this business of rescue, we don't have a lot
Yeah,
of choices. We in the proposal that we gave the government was sanctuaries, up to 1,000 dogs. But you have a
yeah.
500,000 dogs. Well, even if you have 1,000 dogs in a sanctuary living out its life, in peace and in a good situation, what what happened? How many sanctuaries can you possibly have in the country? It's just
Well, this is
not
it.
gonna work.
We have this conversation in Thailand a lot because there's a move towards like mass sheltering and but it's I was never good at maths, right? Which is why I ended up in animal rescue. But even my maths is good enough to figure out. There's one example city that we work in. There's about 9,000 dogs in this city, conservative kind of estimate. So we're running a big CNVR program there. The shelter at the moment that they have has capacity for 500, and they're
Yeah,
talking about building one for another 500. Okay, so you go, that's a maximum of 1,000 dogs. So what about the other 8,000? Where do they go? And they're still breeding, like exponentially reproducing on the streets. So even at the very basic level, you just can't do that. Like you can't
No.
build enough shelters to put all the dogs. Even if you did, who's going to pay for it? And on and on and on. So, I mean, I appreciate that you're like doing this and that you've been doing it for so long, and especially the way you're thinking about it and approaching it. I find it really refreshing. So yeah, I'm glad to speak to you, and I appreciate the offer of support. I really hope we can do something together. I've definitely got the wheels turning of like what I can hit you up for in future. So
Well,
thanks.
whenever whatever you need, we'll make ourselves available.
Appreciate
Whatever
that.
even if it's flying out there, because we go all over the world. One of the teams is going back to Ukraine in a few weeks, and
Yeah.
it's that's
Yeah, Four Paws is I don't I'm sure you know, but we have
we
a
ran into them in Ukraine too.
great. Okay, yeah. So maybe there's a connect there we can put in touch with our because a lot of our team are still working, still like doing the
Yeah,
best they can for animals in that
yeah.
horrendous situation. So
Because we've worked with a couple of sanctuaries who have taken in lions that have been rescued, and
right, okay,
the backyard lions.
yeah.
I don't know if you know. I mean, Ukraine was the exotic animal, kingdom of the world. It just,
I heard, yeah. I was really
oh my
surprised.
God,
I
they'd
was
have
expecting Dubai or Saudi.
bears, bears and lions and things in their backyard that you and I mean. You've got the Russian army advancing it at the beginning of the war, and then we were going in, and you'd hear reports about there's a chained up lion in this yard. What?
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 Yeah.
Hell, he's been there for a few weeks, and he's probably pretty hungry.
Wow.
Okay. So there's a
Yeah.
group that we work with outside of Kyiv who has a sanctuary. Since the war, she turned her horse facility into one where she's got a bunch of, she's got a white leopard, she's got tigers, she's got lions. I mean, some have been domesticated, and the
Hmm.
other ones were eyeing me like I was their dinner. So, you
Yeah.
know,
That's something you don't want to mess around with, eh?
no,
Wow.
those things scare the hell out of me. So I'm not. No,
Yeah, I
I'm.
bet.
It's bad enough being, with a dog, staring you down and trying to take your face off. But a lion, that's a different story for me.
Exactly. Unless it's a chihuahua, then I'm going to take that seriously for
There you
sure.
go.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. Well, look, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, likewise, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad that you could be part of Frontline Tales, and I look forward to working with you in the future and having a further conversation.
Likewise, John. Thanks ever so much. Yeah, much appreciated. Good to meet you. And
Yes.
yeah, look forward to speaking to you again.
All right. Cheers, Meg.
Thanks a lot. See you
Bye bye.
later.